Welcome to Don't Call It Talent. My name is Ron, and today my guest is Travis Dykes Jr. Welcome.
Hey, glad to be here.
Now, Travis is a full time musician, a YouTuber, and I recently found out you're also an author.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool, man.
Yeah, that's actually kind of crazy.
Yeah, you want to tell us how that all worked out?
Honestly, the whole author thing, man, that it happened it's such a blur. I was in 2020, the end of 2020. Actually, this is actually a crazy story. End of 2020 is when I actually really got focused in on doing YouTube. And during that time, I was getting a lot of subscribers and starting to really get my feet up under me with doing this whole content thing. And I got a random email from this company called Hal Leonard, which is uh, probably one of the biggest book publishers for music books in the United States. And they reached out to me. I've read a lot of their books growing, like when I was learning how to play bass and things like that. And so I was like, oh, this is not real. And I was like, if this is real, essentially I text them back on an email and was just like, if this is real, then have a phone call with me. He's such
Right.
and such. And they're just like, all right, yeah, I think we can make that work. And I was like, okay. And I got on a Zoom call, and it was like the I don't know, like the guy who's over all the marketing, like the vice president of marketing or something like that. And
Okay.
I was like, oh, this is real. And then they were just like, we found you through your YouTube channel, and the whole reason why we wanted to get you to write this book is because you have a different perspective than other teachers when it comes to teaching how to play bass. And so I thought, and they thought to it would be cool to get me to write a book for this series they're doing called DIY, which is like do it yourself. And they have it in different instruments. They have it for bass, guitar, banjo, ukulele, all different types of instruments. And they wanted me to do the bass book. And I was like, huh. And so the whole idea is that you how to learn your instrument without a teacher, which is how I learned. I wasn't taught how to play bass by a teacher,
Yep.
but I just learned from experience and being around a lot of people and reading a lot of books. Because whenever I first started, YouTube wasn't really a thing, and so learning from books and listening has been like the thing that I've learned over the years. So that's kind of how that got started. And now I think it came out last May. Yeah, I think last May it came out. And it was really random how it came out because I was on tour, literally on this month-long tour. Then all of a sudden I get a notification like DIY bass by Travis Dykes. And I was like, what? And it was like on Amazon. And I looked on there and I was like, oh my gosh, my book is out.
They
And
shouldn't even tell you. You're just like,
yeah, I didn't even know. I
we'll
think they
figure it
forgot
out.
to send the email. And I was like, oh, I guess I should post something about this. And so that was literally how that all happened.
Wow. That's incredible. I'm glad they were able to get you to do that. I think that's going to help a lot of people out, especially like, I learned probably the same way you did, where you just kind of listen by ear and kind of just figure it out on your own. I'm assuming, but
Mhm.
yeah, I remember sticking cassettes and their little CD player thing and just recording what I hear on the radio and then just trying to play that. So that anything helps nowadays, and YouTube is a huge factor in that. But yeah,
Yeah.
let's take it from the beginning, man. I want to know how you got started with music in general.
Oh man. Um, so when I was 5 years old is when I guess music started to come into my life. I was exposed to music being in church. A lot of times, my mom and dad had me in church like from the day I was born, until now. Like just, exposing me to church and church music, and that's kind of where music was like introduced to me. And then 5 years old is when I got my first drum set because every little boy when they're 5 years old or when they're a little kid, that's where you want to start because you can just
Oh
hit
yeah.
things.
Oh yeah. I got my son a kit whenever he turned 3. So
Exactly, exactly. And so that was kind of where I started, and that was kind of the thing that um, led me to doing and getting interested in music. Um, So then from there, I started learning a little percussion, things like that. And I remember once I think my sister got like an acoustic guitar when I was like maybe like 9, 10 or something like that. And of course, whenever you have siblings, you're like jealous when they get something that you don't have. And so what I did is I started learning the acoustic because I just wanted to play what she had,
Yeah.
her guitar. Because she was like, oh man, I want to play it too. And then eventually I actually started playing it a little bit more than she did and really got interested in it. And and I went to playing guitar. And then from there, I remember I was playing drums and guitar at church a little bit. And my music director or music pastor at the time I overheard her talking to somebody and they were saying how we were missing a lot of bass players. A lot of bass players in our church had moved away, and so we were really in need of some bass players. And I remember when I was looking in the closet randomly at the church, I saw a bunch of like bass guitars that are in just like these cases. I was like, "Oh man, we have so many basses." So I asked my pastor that evening. I was like, "Hey, is there any way I could borrow one of these basses and potentially help out on like a midweek service and play?" And I was about like 12 years old, 12 or 13 years old. And so I was really nervous to ask the pastor. And he
Yeah.
was like, "Oh yeah." He's like, "Yeah, in 6 months to a year, you could be playing a service." And I was like, "Man, that's a long time." Like I was like, "Man, that's for a 12 or 13-year old. You thought you were going to be doing it next week."
Hmm.
so, and so I was like, "Oh my goodness, okay." And so I took it home, and honestly, I got really, really, I guess, excited about it, and I kind of buckled down and really started practicing. And I actually played my first service in 2 months
Oh,
from
nice.
started, and that was kind of the thing that kind of led me to where I am today because it went from that to now. Bass has become like my career in what I
Yeah.
do for a living now.
So you basically just fell in love with the bass guitar at that point.
Yeah, I think it's because it was a mix between guitar and drums,
Hmm.
you know.
Yeah.
And so it was just like, oh man, this is a little easier than guitar. I don't have to do all these chords, but it kind of is rhythmic like the drums. So it's
Hmm.
like the best of both worlds.
Right. That's great, man. It's so many musicians, they start out just from going to church and stuff and getting involved with, like I was in my family was involved in church, and my grandma led the choir and everything like that. So once I started getting into like interest in music and stuff, my thing wasn't the church. That didn't inspire me to pick up, an instrument. But like as soon as my dad found out that I wanted to play the drums, he's like, "Let me take you to the church drummer. I have you drop off at his house, and then you play with him for about an hour or two, and then we'll see what he thinks." You know, I got in there and I played. What he told my dad is that I learned what took him 6 months to learn how to play, and it was just a basic beat, just a 4/4 beat. But he's like, "You need to get this boy some drums," and then next thing you know, getting some drums and taking off. So you
That,
gotta love it.
that's amazing.
So what you said you were about 12 when you started picking up the bass?
Hmm.
Okay, so from there, did you have like a first band that you joined, or did you start a band or anything like in high school or?
So it's a funny thing. I was homeschooled my entire life, so the whole going to band or doing anything in high school was like not a thing for me.
Yeah, yeah, I could see
like,
that. Unless
so
your
I was
mom and
home.
dad were like, "Hey, let's start something up."
Right. Let's see what the neighbors want to do if they want to make a band. No, no, that was actually what's funny is that I was homeschooled from kindergarten all the way through high school, and so whenever I got into like I guess playing, live, and doing all that kind of thing, I was playing at like summer camps. I was playing like worship bands and different groups like that. And then I think the real place where I really feel like I shifted into the professional scene was when I moved away for college, which I graduated. I think I graduated college right around when I was 16 years old. Because I was homeschooled, we were able to kind of go through the summers and do school during the summers, so I was able to graduate early.
Okay.
And so I remember I went to college when I moved away from college. I think I was 17, and I ran into these. When I guess my first semester, I got connected to this group of musicians that were there. They were also trying to make it in music and different things like that. The university I went to was the University of North Alabama, and honestly, that was kind of the first people that I really started playing and gelling with. We were playing. Used to have this trio called Trio Soul.
Nice.
Yeah. So the whole what's so funny is that the whole idea of the group was that because we were all like really good, I guess by ear, we would go to these. We didn't ever tell our clients this. We were so young. Oh my gosh, this is so bad. But we never tell our clients this. But people would hire us to play, like, be a wedding band or play at these different things, and we wouldn't learn the music until we're on our way to the gig.
Oh man.
Every time. And that was on purpose because we were just like, oh man, we wanted to be improv. We wanted to feel good. We wanted to, all that. Oh my gosh, that was so
You're gonna
bad.
challenge
But
your skill set.
right, right. Like literally, I remember there was this one uh, gig. Do you know who Channing Tatum is? Like the actor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So I guess it's like a family member of his or whatever. They had like this wedding at this venue, and we were like, "Oh man, this is gonna be so cool." It was like probably like a 4-hour drive from where we were, and so the whole trip there, we just listened to the music and picked the songs on the way there. And I was like, God, in my head, I was like, "Gosh, this is like kind of a big deal. Why are we, why are we doing this on this gig?" But thank goodness it worked out really well. It worked out. But that was kind of like the vibe of everything that we were doing. And that was kind of like the first like band I started playing with. But then during that time as well, I got my first like gig, like kind of consistent gig playing at a church in town. It was like one of those types of churches. I don't know if you've ever heard about the way like black gospel churches are like that. I guess all the musicians are like really good, and
Oh,
they all
yeah.
really good, have really great ears. And
Got
so
those gospel
whenever
chop term.
exactly, exactly. Well, and what was funny is the church that I started playing at. I can't even remember the name of it, but it was me, a keyboard player, and a drummer. And honestly, it was probably the best training ground for me because this is the way the services would go. We wouldn't know what songs we were going to do, and the pastor would just get up there and start singing, and the keyboard player would just be like "Dun, dun, 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 dun," and then like start playing and jumping in and finding whatever song that he's singing.
Oh
And
man.
that was kind of like how we did services.
I
And
can
so
feel the anxiety from that already because when I did start playing the drums, they had me do that in church, and I never knew what they were playing. They just started playing the keyboard, and I just followed along with the time, man.
but honestly, that was the best training ground because the musicians that were playing were way better than me, and so I kind of felt like I knew a little something. But then when I started playing with them, I was like, "Oh man, y'all are doing this just from nothing."
Oh yeah,
Uh,
that's the best, isn't it?
yeah, it was. I will say it was a challenge. That's where I learned the number system. That's where I learned to just watch whoever's the MD is and what he's doing and where we're
Mhm.
going. It actually, I will say, it was kind of the training ground that kind of made me to the musician that I am today.
Yeah, just for everybody watching, MD is musical director, just in case nobody knew that. But yeah,
Yes.
but yeah, that is such a great way to cut your teeth on things. And it's interesting hearing this and stuff because nowadays, you being the type of musician that you are, I mean, you kind of grew up learning how to play and then grinding your gears on, just kind of getting in certain slots and stuff here and there. And then now you're just working out in Nashville, just anybody calls you up and you're just like, I can do it.
Oh, at
That's
least at least I can. I think I can. That's good. No.
Oh man. Okay, so let's talk about your first touring experience, like full on the road, away from life.
Okay. So I will say I didn't actually, when I moved to Nashville, I wasn't really touring well, I was touring a little bit, but I actually moved to Nashville because of music business. When I first moved to, what brought me to Nashville, so one of my friends, those friends I told you I met when I was in my first semester of college, got on The Voice, and he got pretty far. And I remember there was this time. It was one of the girls that were on the show. They had like a house in like just outside of Nashville, and they had like a lot of the contestants that were in Nashville come over to watch the airing of the show, and they invited me and a couple of our friends there, and so it was really cool. I got to meet all these, awesome, artists and different things like that, and see when they got aired on TV how all that reaction was. That's really crazy to be there when it happens. But one of the things that I was interested in at the time was music business. In the group that I was in, our musical group, I was kind of like the business guy, thinking about the booking and all that kind of stuff. That was kind of the stuff I like to do. And so when this happened, I met all these artists didn't have any managers. And I was kind of managing one group or our trio. And then whenever I guess, went to that area, I was like, this may be a good time to see if anybody was interested in being managed. And honestly, a lot of them were. And so what happened is I started managing them. And when you're managing an artist for the first, bit of time, it really is, it's a lot. You're doing kind of all the jobs essentially.
Yeah.
And so one of the jobs that I would do is to do tour managing and playing while I'm doing tour managing, which that you can see that if you're in Nashville, that happens quite a bit, where you have somebody who's playing and also tour managing. It's not the best thing. If you ever get that opportunity, sure, take it, but you're probably not going to want to stay there forever. But I did that for a little while, and that was like my first tour. I remember this is the kind of, man, this is such a beginning tour experience. I remember one of the tours that we did. We had booked all this stuff. We were doing radio shows. I booked all these radio shows and stuff. I remember this one time on this tour, we went to this place in Mississippi, and I was like, oh man, it started raining, and it was like, I think, sleeting on the ground. And I think a lot of people in the South, unless you're like somebody they really want to see, they're not going to go out in bad weather. And
Yeah.
so I remember we booked this place, and it was just me, a drummer, and a keys player, and the artist. And I remember it was showtime, and there was nobody there. Literally not a single soul. And I was just like, oh my gosh, we just drove 6 hours here. And and I was just like, what is going on? And I'll never forget, we were like, I guess we played a song, two songs, and we were just like, okay, we just need to stop. And then all of a sudden, one person walked in, and because I guess the radio show was doing this thing where they were giving out free tickets, and so this person had won a free ticket to the show and walked in, and so we were just like, you know what, we're just gonna make this show great for this one person.
Right.
And so, and so that was like that was probably one of those memories I don't think I'll ever forget, being on like one of those beginning tours, because it really showed you about being a professional and the reason why you're there. It's not necessarily like, I mean, for me, as being like the manager as well as the booking agent, as well as the touring manager and the bass player or whatever, that it was a little bit on, a little bit on me, a little bit on that marketing and different things like that. But at the same time, it taught me something as a musician. It's just like the purpose of what we're doing it for is for other people to have an experience
Right.
versus, just for us having an experience. Because I think a lot of times when it comes to being musical and being a musician, we always think about self. Man, how can this make me feel good? How can it make, everything I do feel good? But really it's about, how does it make the audience feel? How does the audience feel when you're playing? How's it affecting them? You know what I'm saying? And so I
Yeah.
learned that. I think with this experience, what it showed me is that, you know, this is what it really means to be a like a professional musician. It's not just the mountaintop experiences where you're in a stadium. All those people who have those mountaintop experiences and like they're in stadiums, they're playing with massive artists, they have to start somewhere to be able to have the character to be able to withstand all of that. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Yeah, I was actually gonna say is like everybody's been in that position a time or two. If you're in music, you've been to an empty stage or audience and stuff. And but the thing of it is like you got a full production practice going there, so silver lining.
Well, and honestly though, when you're in the moment, these times where you feel like that, you feel like trash. You're like, oh
Oh
my
yeah,
gosh, I suck. This is not great. What am I doing? But when you look at it, I look back at that and I'm just like, man, that was a really pivotal moment in me, in my character, and learning how to do this professionally. That's kind of like what you have to think about is like these little moments that happen, these experiences, they can seem really bad in the moment, but you have to figure out what you're learning from those moments that's going to help you in the future.
right.
And I think that's a big part of all of this whole like having these experiences that where you have to like work through things.
Yeah, you have such a good insight on things, and that's another reason why I kind of got drawn to your YouTube channel is because one, I was just looking for just a bass channel to follow. You popped up. I watched a couple of videos and like this dude's pretty awesome. Kept going. You had your other videos of like touring, your Nashville recording stuff. Like I didn't know how any of that Nashville recording stuff worked. So, would you mind talking about kind of like how you got into that and kind of more or less, uh, like a short synapse of like what a day in a Nashville recording artist would be like a hired
Yeah.
gun
Yeah. So are you talking about live or in the studio or
in the
both?
studio, in the studio.
In the studio? Okay.
Yeah.
So I will say this. I don't know if anybody's listening or watching know anything about Nashville, but I didn't realize this until I moved here. Nashville's really known for their session players in town, which is like I didn't realize the level until I got into my first session, which is this is kind of insane. Most people don't even get a chance to play at the studio, but there's a studio in town called Blackbird Studios,
Oh
which is
God,
like
I want
a
to go there so bad.
yeah, literally, it's one of the you know greatest studios here in town, or at least a lot of people. It's like one of those monumental Nashville places you got to go at least once.
Right.
But that was where I had my first professional studio or first professional studio session in Nashville, which
Wow.
which is crazy. Because I didn't really know what it was. My friends were talking about, oh yeah, Blackbird, you could rent any gear, all this stuff. I was like, oh cool. And I went there. I was like, oh man, this is like where I literally had my first session. Like I got booked for a session there. But something that I
Nice.
learned really quick is that people who are in this town are can like just read a chart and play like they played the song for years.
Yeah.
Like, and that was the one thing I was like, whoa. I'm like sitting here kind of picking through it, and I'm like, okay, maybe a couple times through I'll get it. First take, most of the people in the group were just done. They were done with their passes, and I was like, what? And that was like I was like, oh, whoa, the level here is something serious, something
Right.
serious.
That was part of your video that I watched and I was like, yeah, there's no way I could do that.
Well, you be honestly, that was the same way that I felt. But I will say the biggest thing that helped me is because every single person was like at really close to this level, even if they weren't like exactly at that level, they're really close. And so it kind of pushed you being in that environment, being in this environment to like get up to that level fast. It's
Mhm.
like, hey, if you can't hang, you're not going to get any gigs.
Right.
so, and
Yeah.
so when, no, go ahead, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, being in that kind of pool of musicians and stuff now is like, is it more word of mouth of like how you get hired on gigs and stuff, or is there like I don't know, maybe like a secret just like website or something that you can pop your name in there and then just go through your stuff? I don't know.
Honestly, it has been word of mouth, but I will say this, something that because I've been here for like just over 10 years now. When I first moved here, social media was a thing, but it wasn't as big of a thing as it is now.
Right.
And and so and so with what
I was gonna say these younger kids don't know, man. It used to be hard.
oh oh I know, man. But and that was the thing, is like it was just all word of mouth, and it's still a huge part word of mouth, but whenever I first got in my session, it was all friends. And I always say this. This is my kind of rule and motto when it comes to networking. And this goes for studio, live, anything you do, is that networking is not just about connecting to people, but it's about actually creating genuine relationships and making a net for yourself versus just doing and connecting to people. Because when I first got to town, I was just like connection. Who can I connect with? Whose number could I get?
Right.
Like that was literally everything. That's what I thought it was. I remember with friends, I would just be we would go into these like these kind of writers rounds and networking events and try to connect whoever the biggest player was there.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the way that we would try to do these things. And what's so funny is that after all being here for so long, no connection that I created or no connection or number that I have so many numbers in my phone, but the only ones that call me for anything are my friends, the ones who are actually friends, and not
Yeah.
the ones, because this is the thing, is that I'm not going to just recommend a big gig that's going to necessarily put my reputation on the line to someone who I don't know. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? And so that's the reason why whenever you start networking, remember that it's a net. It's not necessarily something where you are just trying to, connect just to get a gig, because people can really find that out really quick. But
Hmm.
that's honestly how I started to get connected for studio sessions, live gigs, and different things like that. But now with, social media taking off, Instagram actually, and even more so than YouTube, Instagram actually has gotten me a lot of studio sessions just based off of, I guess, like me doing clips of me playing live or doing little grooves or whatever like that
Yeah.
now.
That's awesome. I know you pop on there. I've seen a lot of lives that you've done recently of doing like I guess your church like rehearsal stuff. Because you're the music director for your church, right?
Yes, yes, that's actually a new thing at the beginning of this year. Well, actually, no, kind of end of last year. End of
Oh,
last year. So.
how's that like?
Man, it's ministry. you know, it's been actually really great. I have a great team, really really great team. And since before I became like over the team, I was just the band leader for a while. And so for the past few years, I've only been at the church for about 5 years now, ever since I've been married.
Hmm.
And I've been on the team for about like probably about 4 of those years, 4.5 of those years. And so from the very beginning, I've been kind of I've learned this thing since I have this life where I travel a lot, to build a team that's self-contained.
Hmm.
And so like where I can leave and do my thing and they'll be okay. And so
Right.
for the past few years up to this point, that's what I've been doing. And so transitioning into this role was actually um, pretty easy to kind of just get still be able to do what I'm doing. But I will say the one thing about it is like having a lot of aspects of my life that most people in my church don't even know about. Some people know that I have a YouTube channel. Some people know that I travel and do stuff, but a lot of people don't even know like, oh yeah, I'm in another country right now. I'm in doing this, whatever. And so it's just really nice to come to a place where it's just like, it's just like family.
Yeah. That's one thing I miss. I haven't had a like my own church for a long time because I've moved around and stuff. And then when I came up here, we just got busy, had kids. I'm just we're about to be searching for a local church and stuff to join. So
How many kids do you have?
two.
Two. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we actually had my daughter in Phoenix when we were traveling.
Oh wow.
I was explaining to him before we started. I've been traveling in RV for the past 17 months. A lot of you who are watching probably know, but like we were in Phoenix, Arizona, and she was born on the 4th of July, actually.
Oh wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, so we've had some fun on the road, that's for sure.
That's awesome.
But yeah, we came back to Cleveland here, and we left from Cleveland and we came back and we were really like trying to decide if we want to stay here or not
Mm.
because we had reasons for wanting to get out of here because mainly of the snow and stuff in the winters and it gets kind of the seasonal depression up here is really something. But yeah, we came back and was like, I don't feel like, I don't feel like I did before we left. How this place was and everything. So I don't know, giving it another try.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
But yeah, so YouTube, how did that start out? What was it like a kind of your run of the mill, like just starting out putting out covers and stuff, or did you have this idea going already?
So with YouTube was one of those things where it was like kind of experimenting at first, because YouTube was a kind of like a new thing that people were just posting on, and I would see
Mhm.
video clips. What is that? And so what I started, the way I got started is that I was looking for lesson videos on YouTube, and I couldn't find any that were like in the gospel niche, like in the gospel genre.
Yeah.
And I was wanting, because all the stuff I was really into was like those gospel players that were playing those crazy licks and crazy grooves and stuff like that. But nobody was posting anything like that on YouTube at the time. And so I started off by posting little videos, you know, explaining, some gospel things, because I was like, if this is the way that I think, maybe it could help somebody out there, because there's no videos on this out there. And so in my mind, it was just like I was putting in my contribution out there of like, oh yeah, hey, here's some gospel stuff,
Yeah.
and and that was kind of how it started. And so from there, I started posting more little videos of lessons, and it was not really consistent. And then I think right before I got married, it was like 2019, I got serious, a little bit more serious about my YouTube channel, because I started thinking about um, my future,
Hmm.
because I was getting ready to propose, and I was like, you know what? I don't want to have to be living gig to gig for the rest of my life, you know. So, and I remember I met this musician. I'll leave his name out of it, but I met this musician, and he's like in his, I think maybe late 50s, early 60s. We're doing a session in town, and he was an incredible drummer. And I asked him, I was like, "Oh man, just you were just talking and we were chatting." And I was like, "So what do you have any plans for, whenever, like, you have any retirement plans? Do you have any plans to slow down, or just do gigs every now and then?" He was just like, "Nope." He's like, "I'm still, playing gigs like I did when I was younger." And I was like, "Oh."
Yeah.
And I was like, and that was like kind of that wake up call for me. And that's part of the reason why I got so energized about YouTube, because I was like, I don't want to be in my late 50s and 60s, my parents' age, and have to do gigs.
Right. Right.
And so I need something that's going to be like kind of like something that will help me retire,
Hmm.
something I could build upon for that particular, end of my life. And so I was like, you know what? YouTube is like kind of like a good platform. I feel like people really watch it, and I don't see it going anywhere for a long period of time. And so I started posting more covers and lessons and different things like that. And then covers were like a big thing for a little while for me. And then like also the behind the scenes stuff on YouTube, that was stuff that I love to see on YouTube. And so I was like, oh man, when I get these opportunities, let me try and like do some little vlogs and stuff.
Hmm.
And that was a lot of fun. But then there was a kind of a shift that happened with covers. And the reason why, because I don't know if anybody on here would, watch my content or anything, but I don't do probably hardly any covers now. And what the reason why that is because there was,
Copyright.
well, yes, that was a big part.
Okay.
And then um, the shift to short form content really messed up covers on YouTube,
Oh yeah.
because what started happening is that people would only want to watch the good parts and not the whole video. And
Yeah.
so it would go to Instagram reels and stuff to see just the good parts, the crazy lick parts,
Mhm.
and don't even watch the whole thing, you
Yeah. I
know?
was having a conversation with my buddy Kyle the other day. He runs a YouTube channel as well, a couple of them actually, and I was like, you know, I don't skip around in videos. I watch the whole thing. Like, it's like I'm not no video skipper. All right. So yeah, how do you feel about that? I know that the short. The reason why I haven't done like YouTube Shorts is because I know that the algorithm will grab a hold of that, and if even if I get a bunch of new audience members from Shorts, I feel like that's going to affect my long term and long form videos really badly.
Yeah.
How do you
So,
feel about that?
that I literally just I have like a couple of members on my YouTube team that kind of help me with like editing and thumbnails and stuff like that. And my thumbnail guy, he was telling me he runs another channel full time for somebody, and he was telling me that he's like, man, you need to get into shorts just because like it's a really big part of the creator economy on YouTube.
Mhm.
And because I hadn't really got into it for that same reason of like I don't want to detract people from my long form content. But what I've noticed is the only reason why I've actually worked shorts in now is just if I have a week that I don't have a video going out or something like that, it kind
Okay.
of creates what you call a touch point. And
Yeah.
so your fans and followers are always connected to you some kind of way. Even because I learned a little bit too is that like there's actually separate algorithms. So there's a separate long form algorithm from the short form algorithm. And
Really.
so it's like they have certain things, and so they don't necessarily mingle per se. And that's the reason why I think whenever you put links in, because I think you could put links at the end of your shorts or like at the bottom in the description to where
Hmm.
you can go to the long form video. Um, and so whenever I started doing that, I was like, I'm not really getting a whole lot of long form from this. It's because they're two separate algorithms. And also, when you think about like scrolling on Instagram, you never want to go to a like a long form. You just kind of want to go to the next short form, next short form. Like
Yeah, you have to
just
be heavily invested in what it is to end up going to long form.
right. You have to have like a very compelling, like, ooh, I have to finish this.
Right.
Like,
Right.
that's to stop
I've
somewhere.
got to know more.
Right. And so now the way that I approach it is just like kind of having a touch point versus like really going all in on shorts because it just I noticed I had a few shorts that did really well that have like a few 100,000 views the past couple of months, and I was like, oh man, my views went skyrocketed. I was like, whoa, I'm getting like crazy views, but the AdSense was like leveled out and also kind of went down,
Hmm.
and then
Yeah.
my watch hours kind of went down as well because they're not watching long form, they're watching short form, and so now, yeah. So now when it comes to covers and things like that, I use my covers. The way I did years ago is I kind of got ahead of it and was like, hey, I'm going to use my covers as short form versus long form. So I'm just going to take whatever the moment is, the cool thing is that from it, and I'm just going to start putting on short form because that's where it is. And then I made all of my longer form content more lessons, reviews, behind the scenes, and studio stuff just because it's it's better in a long form context
Hmm.
and things people are going to be interested in.
Oh yeah, that's some of my favorite stuff from you, man. Is all your little vlogs and like the behind the scenes footage of like shows and the festivals and stuff. That's why I was so like I'm subscribing to this guy. Like,
That's awesome. That's awesome.
but yeah, and, with the shorts too. I mean, when you put those out there, like you said, you're what was the word you used? The contact point. You're making a contact point for when you don't
Point, yeah.
have the video. So in a way too, you're still putting yourself out there.
Mhm.
So like especially with Instagram, like you said, you end up getting a lot of attention from the Instagram posts. So and that ended up getting you gigs. So that's
Yeah,
pretty cool.
honestly, the that was something that I learned because my big thing over the years have just been quality over quantity,
Hmm.
and honestly, it's kind of it's been good, but also it's kind of been hard to be consistent because I've been like really trying to make a video great, and it's just like and then I have to go on a tour, and then I have to do this, and then I have to whatever, and there's just so many different things, and so what I started, kind of the whole point of doing this touch point thing is so whenever I am like taking a week off, or I'm trying not to have too much content for them, they don't forget about me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because that was something I know, like people like Mark Rober, even Mr. Beast. If you know any of those, they're massive YouTubers.
Oh yeah.
Um, they talk about that because their videos, the scale of their videos are so big. Like spending millions of dollars on the video, and they only post one a month. And what they noticed over time, I remember watching this interview with Mr. Beast's manager, is they noticed over time they had a dip in viewers because they weren't getting there was other smaller creators that were making more touch points, with their or contact points with their followers, and so they didn't forget about them because there's so many creators out there on YouTube. If you don't like have some kind of touch point where they're always reminded, hey, don't forget about me. Hey,
Right.
I'm still here. Hey, they just forget about you because there's a whole lot of other great bass channels out there, music channels in general, and I mean honestly, if you don't like keep those touch points up, people can definitely forget about you because for a while the algorithm will not put your stuff up there.
Oh yeah. I think it's funny you said, there's all kinds of bass channels and stuff out there now, but I remember when there was really only like what Scott's bass lessons. It's like,
Scott is the OG.
I know. I still watch the channel from time to time. I just can't help myself.
Oh yeah, Scott, man, he's really he's got it. Like it may have taken him a little while to get to where he's at, but I feel like he's dominated the lesson niche on YouTube, like the bass lessons, everything bass on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I don't know if you've seen any of his recent stuff, but at the level is just keeping it's like still skyrocketing. So
It's really good, but I have to give you props, man. Like I don't know what it is, but the way that you are explaining lessons and stuff through your YouTube stuff, it's just easier for me to grasp when I'm watching your channel. I don't know exactly why, but I don't
oh,
know.
maybe because I'm not as I may not be as knowledgeable as they are.
Oh, come on now.
I bring it down to like my level.
Well, like, were you teaching lessons and stuff before you got on YouTube, or was that something that happened afterwards?
Honestly, that's probably the reason why I've done okay on YouTube with teaching because whenever I first started learning bass at 12 years old, that same year, that same year I started teaching,
Oh, wow.
which is crazy. I was 12 years old, and that's because this is something that I learned with this is like I started teaching because we needed more bass players. So my whole point of doing it was to get more bass players for the church and more, just kind of more musicians. And so something I learned is when I started doing that, the level of my playing skyrocketed
Hmm.
because whenever somebody asked you a question, you had to find the answer.
Yep.
And so it not only made it, you had to get it deeper for yourself, but you also had to be able to have an abundance of knowledge to be able to teach somebody.
Right.
And so that was kind of like where I got started. And I started teaching. I started teaching for free at my church. And then I started teaching for a little money. And then I remember I eventually, I think right before I got married, I had a music school and I had about 37 students, 37 private students that I would teach. And that really got me involved in like teaching online and different things like that and got my chops up with that and working with kids, working with adults and working on communication because my music school was like a completely online music school.
Hmm.
And so got really used to teaching online to where you can't like move somebody's fingers and stuff like that. So you had to be a better communicator.
Right.
And that honestly is what shifted my, I feel like my communication because really all teaching is a game of communication
Yeah.
because over the years that I've been around some of the best musicians in the whole industry, I realized that some of those musicians cannot teach anything. They're like the best player on their instrument out of everybody in the world, and they cannot teach anything because they don't know how to communicate.
Hmm.
And they can communicate musically, but they can't communicate verbally. And
Right.
so if now it's the thing I think I've learned over the years is like, okay, if I'm going to teach something, I need to be able to communicate it to a level to where this student can understand it. Because the whole point of teaching is for people to have that click moment where it's like, oh, I get it. And that's
Yeah.
honestly the best feeling you could get as a teacher is like, oh man, they got it.
I have to ask about how old are you right now?
So I just turned 30 a couple of months ago.
That's so crazy. You have this way about you, this like this I don't know if it's just your knowledge and the way that you talk or whatever. You seem like you're much older. Not saying look wise. You look younger than 30, but what I'm saying is like you just come across as such a like wise, mature man, you know?
Oh my God. You know what? I do feel like because I ever since I left home when I was I think around 17 years old. I've been on my own for all those years, and so it's probably based on being on a lot of situations where I'm stressed out.
Yeah, yeah.
Where
You're just thrown into the fire.
I was thrown into the fire, made all my mistakes early.
Yeah, yeah. That's awesome, man. I have so many more questions I want to ask you, but I don't want to take up too much of your time
Oh,
here.
bro, you're
So,
good.
oh, okay, good. Because I have to ask about your bass. You have a what looks to me like a jazz bass. It's not a Fender though, and I don't remember the name of it. For some reason, I can't remember the name of it. But it's your white bass. It's got. I think you said it's a brown pick guard, but it looks gold, like a gold
Yes.
speckled one. Tell me about that thing.
So I have a Bass Mods K534. So the
Bass
company is called,
mods. That's what it was.
yeah, Bass Mods. It's basically this company, I think out of California.
Okay.
And basically what they do is they pretty much have a prefab body or prefabricated body, which with a neck and a body.
Hmm.
And so what you do is you pick all the hardware and the electronics that go on it.
Okay.
And so that's pretty much what I did is I chose like gold hardware for it, and then one of my friends who's like a really who plays a lot of their basses said, get the bass mod style electronics. Don't try to get a Bartolini or anything. He said the bass mod style is the best, yeah, for versatility, and so that's what I did. I got the bass mods 3-band EQ with the active and passive knob switch or whatever, and then I got a the REJ5s, the rare earth pickups in it. And man, that's honestly been the best thing for
It
me.
sounds so good.
Dude, well, you know what's crazy is that I've so many people have told me that, and I'm like, man, that's crazy. The only issue that I've ever had out of it is that when you go all the way up on the volume, because it's got two 9-volt batteries, so it's what's that, 18
18.
volts of power. Yeah, so like when you go all the way up, it pushes all of that 18 volts, and so it sometimes have like a little small little hiss, when you turn it all the way up.
Ah, gotcha.
But it's not bad. I mean, I've done so many recordings with it. It's never been an issue, and so like, yeah, I will say the one thing that I've recently really been trying to figure out is what's the best strings for it. I've had these recently. I had the Elixir nickel wound or nickel round wound strings. I think that's it.
Okay.
And they have like a brighter sound. But the one thing about Elixir, a lot of friends were telling me about it. I used it for a recording a couple of years ago, and it sounded great. And like most times when you put those strings on, they're so bitey, and you have to like play it a little bit before it dulls down a little bit to like the perfect tone.
Right.
The only thing I had an issue with those is it never did. Literally, it was bright and bitey the entire time. I had them on for a year and a half, and they sounded like almost like when I first got them. And I
That's
was like,
awesome.
which is great. That's great.
Right.
But I think for me, it's like I play with a lot of different genres. I play, in the country world. I play in the worship world, pop world, soul world. And so some of those that poppy, like bright tone is great for gospel, but it's not great for like country, or it's
Right.
not great for worship because it's just too bright and it cuts too much.
Yeah. I could definitely see that being a problem. So what do you do to negate those that brightness when you do, or do you just use another bass or?
So when I do recordings, I usually use a P bass, like depending on the genre. Like gospel wise, I'll just use my bass mods, and
Okay.
then for pretty much a lot of the other stuff, I use the P bass because it just kind of sits really good in mixes.
Yeah.
Um,
That and a lot of people knows how to work with the P bass sound.
right. Well, and honestly, because I'm also at the same time, I'm a producer, like I do productions as well, like for, artists and stuff, like producing the song. And so I think over the years as a producer, I notice whenever I either play bass or get somebody, or been in sessions where I play bass for stuff, I started to notice what the engineer was doing to my bass tone to
Hmm.
make it work. And I was like, huh. So they're kind of like rounding off the top end. Gotcha. So they don't need a lot of top end, it just needs to be the right, And so I
Yeah.
started noticing like, okay, so I'm what they're because the whole idea for me is like I want to make it to where whenever I play on a track or anything, the mixing engineer is like, man, I barely have to touch this.
Hmm.
That's always my goal. And
Yeah.
so that's the reason why I will always like look at mixes and different things like that and be like, what is it that he's doing? Because I want to make sure I fix that on my end. You
Yeah. I
know?
wish I wish everybody that recorded music had that mentality. Is like make it to where they don't have to do anything to it. It's
Well,
like
honestly, what? Oh, I was gonna say, what what's crazy though is that when you do stuff like that and you really try to make an impression on not just the musicians, but like even the engineers, the audio engineers, make their life easier, make the
mm,
manager's life easier by being punctual, all these different things. I've actually gotten gigs, multiple gigs, from people who weren't even musicians.
oh, I bet.
Based, but just like based off of that, which is crazy because all these years, like a lot of people always just say like, "Oh yeah, just you need to meet the bass player, you need to meet the guitar player." But really, sometimes the audio engineer, if you make the audio engineer happy, they'll be like, "Oh man, I know this bass player." Because I've had multiple times where I was recommended by an audio engineer, and they're just like, "Oh dude, you need to get this guy," and I'm like, "What?" And
That's
so
awesome.
I say all that to say is like you just don't just focus on the people who seem like they have all the connections. Focus on, everybody because you never know what opportunities you can get.
That's very true. And I like the way that you phrased that earlier in the conversation, calling it a net. Networking is a net. And I think that stuck with me really easily there. Like I never heard it that way. I just never did. But so do you have anything coming up that you'd like to promote?
So I will say today a lot of people don't know a lot of the behind the scenes stuff that I do with my YouTube channel and how much of a grind it is. But one of the things that I just sent to my team today, I sent this big long, message to them. This video, I just posted a video at the time of this when we're recording this, which I think is like right at the end of May.
Yeah.
And I've told my team, I was like, hey, I this is the last video that we're posting to where it's like a filler style video or anything like that because what has been the issue for me over the years has been like staying consistent and we've
Right.
stayed consistent but we've noticed really huge dips and rises with our video with the videos and stuff that we're putting out. And so I told them today, I was like, hey, I took some time out, I scheduled all the videos for the rest of the year, and what we're going to do from now on is we're only going to do our best work. We're not going to try to do anything filler. We're not going to try to do anything where we're just, jump. And now, if we need to jump on a trend for something that's really cool that we think would be a great video, sure. But we're really just trying to do the best work possible starting in June for the rest of the year. So I guess the thing that I'm excited about is what's happening on my YouTube channel the rest of the year,
Yeah.
which one of the big projects, which man, I will say, when you try to scale up videos, man, whew, it takes some energy.
Oh
But
yeah.
like one of the projects is this room right here. If anybody knows anything about my channel, this is the same room that I've done all my videos in. And so this is one of the biggest videos I think I've done like ever. It took a lot of time. Well, it's I did it in a week, but it really took a lot of time and effort. And this was like the first video in this series of videos for the rest of the year that
Mhm.
I'm trying to scale up. So this, I'm doing a whole video on this entire renovation I did of my studio. And then I've got some other ones coming up with like, bass builds and different things like that. And man, I'm really just excited for what's going to be happening on the channel the rest of this year.
I am too, just from what you were saying. It's like, wow, I'm ready for this. Like I talked a little bit with you about this before we started, but the studio build, I'm very interested in seeing that. I used to have my studio going, and I miss it like crazy.
Dude, I've always loved watching studio renovations. Like I'm one of those people that like watching shows like Fixer Upper and stuff like that.
Oh yeah,
And that's like, I don't know, maybe I'm just an old spirit or whatever, but I don't know. It's just like,
me too, brother. Me too.
but this studio has always just been like a wreck.
Yeah.
Everybody would just see like a fraction of what's actually happening in here,
Well,
and it's
that's all
gonna
you
be
need. You just need that little bit of spot clean to take the
just
video.
put just put the YouTube plate plaque somewhere in there, and you'll be fine. Like,
Why do you think it's so dark back here, man?
exactly.
Yeah.
No, but I think something I never realized over the years is how big of a deal your environment makes.
Oh yeah.
Like even since we've done the renovation here, I feel like my work ethic and just work mode just like has like my efficiency has went up so much. Not I'm not saying that you have to have this to, to like get better,
You
but
don't, but it helps.
it definitely helps. Well, honestly, up until this point, 10 years now, I've had a $20 desk that was bowing in the center, which I'll show like on the
Oh
video.
yeah.
And it's just like stuff like this. And honestly, a lot of people don't even know this that I have never owned a tripod in my life
Really?
as a creator, yeah. And only I think about a year and a half, 2 years ago, I got my first camera, and I got to about 100,000 subscribers with just my phone up until that point.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
not surprising, to be honest with you. That's just a lot of people prefer the phone shot video sometimes.
well, and the thing is, I feel like what it taught me over these years now is like how to create content that's not just good production wise. Because I think a lot of people can polish things that's not
Mm,
really good content with production. And when you don't have production, your content really actually has to be good,
yeah,
for
yeah.
people to actually watch you. It has to be interesting. And so I feel like for all these years now, that's kind of been like the one thing that I've had going for me is just really focusing down on the content. And now I'm trying to elevate the production for, the future of the channel.
Oh man, I'm excited about that. It's just it's been a pleasure talking with you, man. And I would like this is one of the questions I sent you over, so hopefully you're not too, surprised by it. But what is something that you, let's say, advice that you would give to just people that are trying to do the same thing? Not just people starting out. Everybody asks that question for some reason, but just your peers in general. What kind of advice would you give?
You know, I feel like I got this actually when my early 20s, whenever I was really on the grind doing YouTube music, everything like that. Um, and your limitations are your biggest benefactor. Limitations are your really the fuel to your creativity.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of people always think about limitations as something bad. They think about like, oh man, I don't have enough money to get this. I don't have enough money to do that. And what I've learned, even just with me with playing bass, not even YouTube, but just playing bass and getting in the industry, I didn't, I've never actually bought a bass over my life of being a bass player. Which not saying that everybody should do that, but I've just never had the money to do it. I
Yeah.
never had the money, and so even the bass that I got from Bass Mods was gifted to me from a church.
Nice.
That was literally gifted to me from a church, and so up until that point, to even get to that point, I was just using a bass that was borrowed. You know what I'm saying? And so that was like my limitation, when it comes to the situation that I'm in. And honestly, there's a book called The Unfair Advantage, and basically the whole idea that I feel like anybody who's trying to create or do something is look at your unfair advantage. And what I mean by unfair advantage is what is your limitation? Your limitation is your unfair advantage.
Nice.
For me, it was money. For me, it was connections. It was not knowing how to do this YouTube thing. And so what started to happen is that my stuff was looking different than other channels. My videos were a little bit different than other things. The way I taught was a little bit different because I was just working with what I had. And what started to happen is that became my unfair advantage. And that became, I wasn't looking like necessarily Scott's Bass Lessons or Derek Bennett or anybody like that. I was looking like at just what I could do. And so
Right.
even for me, being in the professional industry, that I know not everybody has that experience of being able to like be on these gigs and different things like that. And so I was like, you know what? That's my unfair advantage. That's my unfair advantage that I'm not seeing, even though I may not have the studio space. I may not have the quality level necessarily as some of these other guys, but I can bring, what I have and make that my thing, you know?
Right.
So if there's anybody who's trying to do anything when it comes to freelance, music, anything, it's just utilize your limitations to fuel your creativity.
Man, that is some great advice, Travis. uh, I'm just letting that soak in right now. It's just great. You threw me off, man. It's so good. But yeah, I again, I appreciate you giving your time and doing this. I think there's a lot of valuable information in this conversation, so I very much appreciate it. And everybody, do yourself a favor, go to his YouTube channel, like his stuff, go to Instagram, follow him. Like I said, this is just a little tip of the iceberg of the knowledge you can learn from this man. So, Travis, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh man,
And
thank you so much for having me.
hopefully we'll get you back on here sometime in the near future.
Oh yeah, I love that.